You're watching The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report.
Welcome to a special trade deadline edition of The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report. I'm your host, Simon Cherin-Gordon, and I'm excited to get the colloquial ball rolling here. Let's first swing the rock around to our team. We have resident draft expert Patrick Oxford.
Glad to be here, man.
Hoops Habit and 94 Feet writer Josh Cornelissen.
Guys, we had ourselves a deadline.
That is a good take. We also have Mr. Bad Take, Jae Gongora.
The Celtics didn't make a move, and they're going to go in the trash. It's all good.
Eager to respond to that, I'm sure, we have executive producer Alex West.
Listen, Jay, I won't have any Celtics trashing on my show, okay?
The opening tip.
So we have to start off with the Cleveland Cavaliers, guys. I mean, everybody talked about the Cavs leading up to the deadline. They were the most talked about team, but no one thought they would be this active. All in all, they traded Isaiah Thomas, Channing Frye, Iman Shumpert, Jay Crowder, Derrick Rose, Dwayne Wade, and a 2018 first for Jordan Clarkson, Larry Nance, George Hill, and Rodney Hood. They also lost and gained a second rounder. But rather than getting into the minutia of each little deal, because they made so many, I don't even know how many, on a whole, what do you guys make of their deadline and its impact? Let's start focusing on this season.
So first of all, the Cavaliers had to do something about Isaiah Thomas. He was a toxic presence in the locker room. Just by removing him, that's going to change the culture for the better. For as excellent and amazing as he was last year, he was everything but that this year. So he had to be moved. But that being said, I don't think Cleveland got better for this year. Now look, you had the hope before that Thomas and Jay Crowder would kind of regain their past status and be really good contributors for the Cavaliers. That ceiling is gone by trading them, and in its place is a bunch of injury-prone, younger, unproven players. Look, Rodney Hood, George Hill, they're unable to stay on the court. Rodney Hood has missed 70 games over the last 3.5 seasons. Hill has missed 88 over that same span. They just can't rely on these guys to be healthy. And if they're not healthy, then the Cavs have basically nothing to show for their trade deadline move. So I just don't think they got better with these moves.
Well, Josh, they better hope they got better this year, because after giving that first-round pick up to the Lakers in that IT trade, it's hard to argue that they got better long-term. I think that if, you conglomerate all the deals together, they did get a little bit better this year, I think. I'm not sure it's going to make a difference in a series versus the Celtics or the Raptors, but I think that you can at least make the argument that the third seed should be something they can hold on to.
Well, as far as this year, they definitely got better as far as watchability is concerned. I'm definitely watching a lot more Cavs games than I was previously. Long term, probably not the best moves. A lot of money locked up in Clarkson, a lot of money locked up in Hill. I don't like for their long term business and cap space flexibility. But that's not my concern. They can do what they want. I'd like this team this year. I like it for the playoffs. I think they have a lot more flexibility position-wise and are a more interesting matchup when playoffs come around.
I tend to agree that they're a little bit more watchable than they have been, but I'm not sure what that does for me. They have the best player on the planet right now in LeBron James, and maybe this infusion of new blood is going to be exactly what they need to sort of revamp just the mentality that's in the locker room. They didn't add any good defenders. If you check out the TPA database on NBA Math, Rodney Hood is a minus 56. George Hill's a minus 29. Clarkson's a minus 57 in defensive points saved. Larry Nance is a little bit of a positive. He's a plus 52. But this is a team that had a bad defense, and I'm not sure adding these players is really going to improve it. Now, they're going to be somewhat improved because Isaiah Thomas was probably the worst defender in the league, but I'm not sure how much their defense is going to improve. But if anything, they're a little bit more watchable, and they're going to be a little bit more exciting for the playoffs.
I think another area where the Cavs did not get better this season is in their front court depth. So, they upgraded the backcourt, and that's something they needed to do. Hill, Hood, these guys have a lot of upside. They're younger. They have, the flexibility to be able to really make an impact. I think that's reasonable to say. But in the front court, they got weaker. And by trading Jay Crowder, they really got rid of the only guy who could play the Shane Battier role for this team. And by that, I mean that Shane Battier would play on the wing alongside LeBron James back on the Heat, and he would guard the guy that LeBron didn't want to guard. And he'd take the beating, a lot of times taking those bigger power forwards. And there's no guy left to do that. They can't trust Jeff Green to fill that role. He's inconsistent wildly from minute to minute, let alone game to game. And so without having a guy like that in this lineup, I think they're really going to struggle to guard teams with a number of versatile wings, such as, the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, Josh, you make a good point. I think Larry Nance might be that guy at some point, or at least ideally that's the guy that they want him to be, because I think what they want to do is be able to play Hood and Clarkson, or Hill and Hood, or maybe Hill and Clarkson together. I'm not sure. And then be able to pair it out with Nance and Kevin Love when he's returned, or Tristan Thompson and LeBron, because that's a pretty good shooting lineup on the other end. And it is a pretty lengthy lineup as well. So maybe they're going to try it by committee, but I think Larry Nance is a pretty decent defender on the perimeter. I watched some tape on him. I just recently wrote an article about the Lakers, and he doesn't do too badly, so maybe he'll be able to fill that role if they decide to pair him with another big.
Yeah, for my money, guys, I think they're a stronger contender than they were before. The loss of Crowder hurts, but he didn't really look like he was the same guy anymore. And they need that depth if they're going to stand any chance against Golden State, because LeBron can't play superhuman 44-minute nights every night at this stage in his career. But there's another side to this beyond this season, and that is, of course, the future, right? The future with LeBron and the future of this team. So first I want to ask you, does Kobe Altman's flurry of deals at this year's deadline increase their chances of keeping LeBron? Does it really increase the chances? Does it move the needle? And then second part here, if he does leave, are they better or worse off with Hill, Hood, Nance, and Clarkson than they would have been with essentially an extra draft pick, a late first-round pick, and cap space?
As far as LeBron's future is concerned, I think today's deals really set up a strong contender of the Sixers making a strong push for getting LeBron in the offseason. It's got it all set up. Why would you want to go to the Lakers? They have IT. They're going to re-sign IT. They share the building to Clippers, the same team that was owned by Donald Sterling. There's no reason for him to go to the West Coast. He's going to either the Celtics or the Sixers, one of those two teams. It's set up. It's the runway. He's coming in for the landing. He's staying in the East. He's leaving the Cavaliers. He's going to join Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, or he's going to come back and he's going to have some sort of romantic moment with Kyrie, and he's going to find their bonding space, and they'll reconvene in Boston, and they're going to win 3 championships and just knock Golden State out of contention. That's LeBron's future. It's our future, and we're just going to love it.
Well, I don't even know how to follow that up. So I'm going to maybe go in a different direction. I think that this was honestly probably Cleveland's best shot at retaining LeBron. Not trading the Brooklyn pick like a lot of people talked about, but I think making the team younger. They've restocked the cupboard with a lot of younger players, which has been what LeBron's teams have lacked in years past. If you look at the Heat and you look at the Cavs, a day ago, they've been bled dry by the organization trying to keep up with LeBron and his, competitiveness. And by adding younger players, they've kind of given this team another chapter, and that could convince LeBron to stay. Look, the guys they sent out, Shumpert was 27, Crowder was 27, Isaiah Thomas was 29, Channing Frye was 34, Dwayne Wade 36. In return, they got 3 guys in Rodney Hood, Jordan Clarkson, and Larry Nance who are just 25. That's a youth infusion you didn't think this team would be able to have. And I think that's probably the best case for telling LeBron, hey, look, this team can continue competing. They're not about to die off. They're not about to fade into the distance. You could come back and win with a new wave of younger players. The problem here is that, unfortunately, Kobe Altman could not trade Dan Gilbert away. And ultimately, that's the move that he couldn't make that I think is really going to influence LeBron's decision.
On a serious note, yeah, I think today's moves actually do help Cleveland's ability to re-sign him with the positional flexibility that they now have with Clarkson, Hill, Hood, and having Love. I don't know if having Love helps them or hurts them in the future, but having him locked up certainly helps their ability to impact LeBron's decision. Yeah, given the amount of teams that won't have cap space next offseason and the stranglehold that Golden State puts over the Western Conference, I really think there's a strong possibility either LeBron signs for 1 year or maxes out, finishes his career with Cleveland next season, because he really does not have many other choices other than his hometown.
So even though I think Cleveland's making their best chance at retaining him, I do think it's very likely he's going to look elsewhere. And the Lakers still remain a strong candidate. In fact, I think an even stronger one with the moves they made today. By being able to move Jordan Clarkson, and rather than having to give up assets, they got a first-round draft pick. That's going to give them some ammunition to potentially move Luol Deng this summer if they need to add LeBron and another max guy. And look, for LeBron, it's never about the competitive nature of the team and going to LA. Yes, that matters, and he's going to want to be able to win, and he's going to want to compete. But it's about the next chapter of his life. By going to LA, he can set up his business interests to extend for decades past when his playing career ends. That's the reason he goes to LA. That's the reason he goes there, to build a brand, to become the next great Laker. And that's going to catapult him to continue with his power and influence long past the time when his body can no longer play basketball.
So you guys talk about LeBron's potential move to LA, and it's interesting. Earlier this week, ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski and Ramona Shelburne reported that the Lakers are, quote, recalibrating their focus from the summer of 2018 to that of 2019. And that's a year, for the record, that could feature free agents such as Klay Thompson, Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler, all wings that seem to fit in with the young core the Lakers are building. But then the Lakers did go out and they moved the Clarkson contract, and they moved Nance for Isaiah Thomas's expiring deal and a first. So they reopened their pathway to 2 max slots. And it's unclear kind of what direction they're leaning, or if they're looking to get in the market both summers. We'll start with Alex on this one. Does LA's deadline deal run counter to the report earlier this week about their supposed pivot to 2019?
Simon, I think what the Lakers have done here is really interesting. They've set themselves up in both summers to be able to do those max contracts. So if they strike out this year, they may be able to do another deal like they did with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope this year and overpay someone for a year to maintain that flexibility while still adding a piece. And I think that's probably the most interesting route for me, is they're going to pitch Paul George and they're going to pitch LeBron James. But if they strike out, they still have a really interesting core with Ingram and with Ball, and then obviously with whatever they're going to do with Julius Randle. So I really like the Lakers setup, and I feel like they control a lot of their pieces both this summer and next summer.
I think that the report that they're looking to make a move in 2019 is possibly true, in that the Lakers let that get out. But I think they're obviously keeping their flexibility open for this summer as well, which was the smart thing to do. Moving Jordan Clarkson, yes, that frees up cap space for this summer, and it clears up cap space for the summer of 2019. It serves both purposes. And by adding that first round pick, now they have an extra asset to move money, such as Luol Deng, if they need to this summer. Look, if LeBron James and Paul George are coming, they're obviously going to make a move in the summer of 2018. But if not, then they're setting themselves up for 2019 really well. Klay Thompson, Kawhi Leonard, these guys are from the Los Angeles area. Jimmy Butler has strong LA ties as well. All three of those guys are worthy of max deals in the summer of 2019. So I think the Lakers are definitely gunning to add talent either summer. And I think that's clear from the move they made yesterday.
And Josh, I think I like the 2019 deals a little bit better. It fits in with their timeline just a little bit closer. Those guys are a little bit younger than what you're going to get in Paul George and LeBron James. And it also sort of lets the sun start to set on the Golden State Warriors, particularly if they can pry Klay Thompson away. So what they're doing is they're pushing that window out a little bit. And I think if you get LeBron and Paul George, your window is going to be a pretty immediate impact, as opposed to maybe landing a Jimmy Butler and a Kawhi Leonard or even a Klay Thompson a summer later. Then you start to set yourself up to be the next rising power in the West.
I think another benefit of the Lakers targeting 2019 is that it gives their young players another year to develop and grow. There's a limited amount of reps that they can get playing alongside max stars. But if they've got another year on their own where Coach Walton can put the ball in Brandon Ingram's hands, can let Lonzo Ball kind of get more of a feel for the speed of the NBA game, I think that only helps them moving forward. And then they can add those kind of bigger names down the road. In addition, while they have that extra cap space from this summer, they can take advantage of a tight market and actually take on contracts and get more assets and deals that are going to run out in another year, again setting themselves up to have the cap space in 2019, but by adding more assets, that's only going to help them build a sustainable contender down the road.
Yeah, I don't know, guys. I think might be putting a little too much stock into this Laker recalibration. If LeBron James wants to go to LA, if Paul George wants to go to LA, they're both going to LA this summer. I don't know if it's spin. I don't know what it is. Maybe they're just tempering expectations, but they're ready for those guys if they want to be there. But let's move on from the Lakers, from the Cavs. Clearly the most interesting teams to talk about at this deadline, but there were a lot of other moves made. So excluding those two teams, I want to start getting your winners and losers here, guys. We'll start with Patrick. Patrick, who's your winner of the 2018 trade deadline?
My winner for the deadline today is the Orlando Magic. They didn't make a big move, but they moved Elfrid Payton out of town, picked up a second-round pick, and they cleared the way for one of Trae Young or Luka Doncic to come over and take the reins and start a new fast-paced offense they can really run with.
My winner would have to be Miami, of course, for getting Dwayne Wade for basically nothing, and for all of us to have the ability to buy the Miami Vice D-Wade jerseys. It's really once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I think Dwayne Wade could have some serious potential of helping the Heat on a playoff push.
My winner is actually going to be the Detroit Pistons. Detroit sacrificed a lot of their depth in the trade for Blake Griffin, but that trade has worked out great for them as they're undefeated with Blake playing the point guard role for that team. But they need to fill out around him, and they did that at the deadline. James Ennis from the Grizzlies, he's a solid wing who can step in. He's efficient. He's in the 92nd percentile in points per shot attempt, and he's low usage. So he's a perfect fit alongside guys like Reggie Jackson, Andre Drummond, and Blake. Jameer Nelson as a backup point guard, I think is a perfect fit. He's another guy who's low on usage but high on three-point attempts and would be perfect spotting up around Andre Drummond, basically filling the same role he filled all those years back for Stan Van Gundy in Orlando.
Sort of a low-key move later in the day, but I think Phoenix was a real winner grabbing Elfrid Payton for a second-rounder. Payton hasn't been spectacular, and I think that's maybe underselling the case during his tenure in Orlando, but grabbing him for such a discount price really helps out Phoenix, who is looking for a point guard to pair with Devin Booker, and I think they're probably a big winner to do it with a basement bargain with the way they got Elfrid Payton.
All right, guys, time for the losers. We'll go back to Patrick for this. Patrick, who you got?
My losers today, for the same reason as the Magic were the winners, are the Memphis Grizzlies. They went ahead and did not move Tyreke Evans. They could have claimed an asset that they just found this offseason. Instead, they decided to hold on to him, and if they buy him out, it's just a lost chance at a second-round pick. And if they let him go to free agency, they run the risk of not being able to hold on to him at all.
I'd have to take the Knicks as my loser, simply for the fact of being the Knicks. While the trade for Moutier wasn't entirely, a pitfall, the trade of Hernan Gomez after the Kristaps injury is just unforgivable and asinine, and what you'd expect from the Kings or the Suns, and at this point, what you would expect from the New York Knicks, and just continues a long road of mistakes and poor judgment. And once again, the New York Knicks are the loser this season.
For my loser, I'm going to take a look into the future, and I'm going to pick the Minnesota Timberwolves as a loser from the trade deadline. Here's why. The Cavaliers traded Derrick Rose to the Utah Jazz, and he's going to be bought out, so he's going to become a free agent. And Tibbs is going to go back to the well of former players, and he's going to sign Derrick Rose, and that is a huge mistake. Look, out of all the point guards in the league, Derrick Rose was 93rd in RPM this year. 93rd. Tyus Jones, the Timberwolves' current backup, is 4th in the league. But you know what Tibbs is going to do? He's going to sign Derrick Rose. He's going to cut Tyus Jones minutes. He's going to play Rose. He's going to put him in crunch time alongside Jeff Teague. He's just going to mess everything up. It's going to be the dumbest thing in the world, and we're all going to sit and watch it happen and just think about what could have been if Derrick Rose would have just signed with another team. Future loser, Minnesota Timberwolves.
For me, I think the big loser today is the LA Clippers. They were looking for a deal for DeAndre Jordan. Obviously, it fell through. They couldn't find any takers, even though Toronto swooped in at the 11th hour to maybe take him on. And I feel like maybe that's probably just a sign of not getting what they wanted out of him. They didn't want to give up on DeAndre Jordan for nothing, but they didn't get the return that they were looking for. And now I feel like they're in a pretty tough predicament with his contract and what's going to shake out with him. And other than that, I mean, I really don't understand the Lou Williams deal for the same reason. This is a franchise that's going to rebuild, or as they put it, retool. But far be it from me to tell Jerry West how to do his job. So I imagine they're going to get it sorted out. But right now, it does feel like they're the losers.
Yeah, Jay, I think you were way too harsh on the New York Knicks. I mean, Willy Hernan-Gomez is a nice player, but if you turn him into Emmanuel Mudiay for essentially the net cost of a second rounder, I don't have a problem with that. But guys, with the trade deadline winding down here, or now past, we have to turn to the buyout market. So before March 1st, there's going to be activity on the market. Got teams looking for that extra boost for the playoffs. We saw a lot of teams not make moves that we expected to, and we saw a lot of players not move that we expected to also. So we'll start things off here by identifying who some of those players are. I mean, I don't think there's a Josh Smith out there this year, but there's still some interesting candidates. Patrick, why don't you break some of those down?
Yeah, looking at the rosters, I see 5 potential buyout candidates that I think could be useful to playoff teams. I'll start off with the Memphis Grizzlies. I just listed them as a loser because they didn't move Tyreek, and I think they'd be really unwise to buy him out just because you're just doubling down on stupidity at that point. But he's a possible buyout, and he could definitely help a team that needs some playmaking. His outside shooting, I'm not totally sold on being a thing, but it's worth a risk for a team that just needs that extra rotation player to push them over the edge. Next on my list, Maurice Spates for the Orlando Magic. I think Spates is going to add a shooting touch to a team. Hopefully he doesn't go back to the Warriors for my sake as a Rockets fan, because he could be really dominant in that setting. But I think that he could really add a really nice shooting touch and a nice little veteran toughness that a team may be missing in the front court. Next up, Joe Johnson. He was just moved, and he's expected to be bought out. He's another guy you can play the stretch for the Warriors, the Rockets, any team that really needs a guy there. I think there's concerns as to how he'll fit into some of their offenses. He's kind of known for being a ball stopper, so there could be some fit concerns. Boris Diaw is currently playing in France right now, but he has an NBA out in his contract. That's a solid veteran. He's up there in age right now, so maybe there's concerns athletically, but he's a solid candidate who can add veteran savvy and can solve small ball issues for a team. And then the last person on the list, Isaiah Thomas. I don't think he will be bought out, but if he was to be bought out, it'd be a no-brainer move for any team.
All right, so if these guys do get bought out, I mean, what teams will be interested? Josh, who do you think is going to be active on this market?
I think as active as the buyout market could be, there are a number of teams that need to be active in adding talent. Now, a couple filled needs, such as Denver and Miami, acquiring Devin Harris and Dwayne Wade, surprisingly, respectively. But there's still a number of teams out there that have some pretty glaring needs. New Orleans is a big one. They lost out on Greg Monroe, and they really need a backup center. And maybe even a guy who could start alongside Anthony Davis and then slide kind of into the backup role. So they definitely need to be looking at the bigs to see who could fill that role for their team. Cleveland, first of all, what they need are name tags so everyone can introduce each other. But after that, what they need is going to be a wing, another forward guy I mentioned earlier in the show, who can kind of fill that Shane Battier role, guard some fours alongside LeBron, and fill up some of the minutes there. The Minnesota Timberwolves, what they don't need is Derrick Rose. And really what they don't need at all is more shot creation. They have that in buckets. What they need is a defensive forward, a guy who can come in on the wing when Jimmy Butler's on the bench and still guard offensive threats on the other team. And finally, the Oklahoma City have probably the most obvious need in the entire league, which is at the 2-guard spot. Losing Andre Robertson, as divisive as a player as he is, create a huge hole in that rotation, and they need to find someone on the buyout market who can step in and hit some shots. Who that is, I don't know yet, but that's going to be probably the most obvious hole that needs to be filled from these players that are going to be bought out.
All right, guys, that's all the time we have for today. Really good discussion. Before we go, any last-second shots, buzzer beaters?
Shout out to the Kings on realizing they made a huge mistake drafting Papa Giannis, and I respect any future draft moves they make up until their next draft pick.
I have one thing and one thing only. Free Tyus Jones. That is it.
Everybody's been talking about the Cavaliers, the Lakers. The true story of the trade deadline, Woj bombs. He just blew up the deadline, and Shams was just sat there sitting around with second rounders and cash considerations.
All right, guys, now that the trade deadline's over, I can finally get some sleep.
Thanks for watching the Swingmen presented by the 94 Feet Report. I'm your host, Simon Cherin-Gordon. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and also follow us on Twitter at the 94 Feet Report. Catch our show every Friday. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching The Swingmen, presented by the 94 Feet Report.